Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to do a video that's a little bit different. I've had a few requests for something like this before. I figured why not do it now. My house is currently under construction, but I just got my network rack set back up. And I figured why not show you guys what I'm running. I've done a few videos on how to set up UniFi networks and edge router tutorials, so I have gotten a few questions on what I actually run in my own home network. Now, fair warning, this is going to be absolute overkill and entirely unnecessary. So what I am running in my own home is probably more complex than a lot of small businesses, at least in my opinion. If you've seen more complex home networks, let me know. But I figured I'd just walk you guys through each part of my network, why it's there, why I chose for it to be there, why I made some of the decisions that I've made, and just kind of an overall picture in case you were curious. So let's just go ahead and jump right in here. Here is my network rack. This is the front of it with the door closed. You can see there is a lot of stuff in there, and we'll kind of go through each one by one, see what they do. Here is the first portion of the rack. You can see I've got some patch panels, my Edge Router 4, modem, and a SonicWall, as well as a switch, and a monitor and keyboard setup. And if we keep going down the line, you can see we've got 3 servers here, as well as a power bar. And on the bottom there is my UPS system. You can ignore that Xbox 360. It is not a part of the network. And moving around to the back, I do have another rear-mounted switch, which is completely full, which explains why there was another switch in the front. And like I already said, my house is under construction, so this is entirely messy. Hopefully in the future I can get it cleaned up a little bit, but all of those patch panels are going to actual wall outlets, which you can see here. It's not finished yet, but there are going to be Ethernet runs in every room, which come back to this rack and terminate to those patch panels. So that's the general overview, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. So let's just break it down and explain what the purpose of all this stuff is. So starting at the top of the rack here, I've got my 3 patch panels. There is no need for 3. I probably won't even fill one up. What I did in my last house was I actually had everything terminated to a patch panel, but if you've ever tried to punch down the back of these, you get real tired of doing it after about 5 ports. So I'm just not gonna do that again. But I am going to use this top one here as all the ports for my various rooms, as well as my wireless access points, which actually are not pictured here, but I do use UniFi AP AC Pros for my access points. And pretty much everything will terminate here, so I'll have like these first 4 are going to be my living room ports, and then the second 2 will be for like the other side of the living room, and then bedroom, etc., etc. All those connections are going to be on the back of this patch panel, and these 2 are just here to look pretty. Now this box here is my ISP modem, which is a fiber connection coming in the back. You can't see the fiber cable, but just pretend there's one back there. That is going to the box outside my house where the internet comes in at, and this modem actually can't be placed in bridge mode. So what I have is a DMZ setup, which pretty much forwards everything directly to my Edge Router, and this is the main workhorse, my Edge Router 4. And you can see I've got all 3 interfaces filled up. This one here is my internet port, which is going to the modem, and then I basically have 2 interfaces for each of my switches. So one of them goes to, actually this red one here just goes down and plugs into my first switch, and then the second one's going to go to the rear of the rack where that other switch was. And then this here is my Philips Hue, which controls the lights for my house. And this is something we haven't really talked about on this channel before, and that is a SonicWall. This is a firewall and threat management device. However, I just use it for VPN access. Basically, this entire box is just for SSL VPN because I think SonicWalls are very easy to set up for SSL VPN, and they use what's called NetExtender or SonicWall Mobile Connect, and that's an application that's available pretty much on any device. You can put it on your phone, you can put it on Mac, put it on Windows, and it's a very simple interface to connect VPN back to this network. And then this switch here, which is a Cisco small business, I believe it's an SG250, or actually I think it's an SG300. And this is pretty much for all of my internal personal network devices. So like all of these ports are going to eventually terminate to this switch. Right now, this has my main desktop on it, my wireless access points, as well as like the Philips Hue. Pretty much anything that's going to be on my network that I use every day and the rest of the family uses, it's going to be on this switch. And this does have power over Ethernet, so this also powers all of my UniFi AP-AC Pros. Now moving down, this is actually my house's heating system. Just kidding, it's 3 servers. So we've got up here at the top, we've got a Dell R630. This is my most recent server. It is running Windows Server 2019, and its main purpose is basically a Hyper-V host. Actually, both of these are Hyper-V hosts. We've got an R630 and an R620, both running Windows Server, but the R620 is running 2012 instead of 2019. And their main purpose is basically just to host virtual machines. I put kind of my more performance-oriented machines, or ones that I use the most and needs better performance, on the R630 because it's newer, and the R620 is just kind of bulk all of the other VMs. And if you're curious why I'm running Windows Server instead of something open source like Proxmox or pretty much everything else, it's just I'm used to Windows Server, and I think Hyper-V is really easy to work with. I don't really want to go through the licensing issues and trying to figure out how to get ESXi on these things. Plus, the trial versions of ESXi are pretty limited anyway. Hyper-V, you get all the full-blown features on the Evaluation Edition anyway, and each evaluation license for Windows Server is good for 180 days, and you can rearm them up to, I think it's 2 or 3 years. So eventually I will have to do some maintenance and tear Windows Server off of it, reinstall, and set everything back up, but I should only have to do that every couple of years on an evaluation license. And no, these are not used for production hosting or anything that I make money off of, so I'm not skirting the license rules here. But this next server I have here is also a Dell, and it's an R510. Now this is basically my storage boy, and I decided to just write the operating system versions on there, even though it is very hard to read with that yellow. But anyways, this R510 is running Unraid instead of Windows Server. So this was actually my first one. I set it up and I chose Unraid because I can have redundancy through the parity drive without having to have all the drives match. So I don't lose a ton of space. I only lose the space of my parity drives, and I can basically add and remove disks as I want, and I don't have to worry about messing with a RAID array or having a set amount of disks or setting it up and tearing it down. So something like FreeNAS, while it does essentially the same thing, I'm not constrained by the hard drive space and everything matching. I can just throw anything I want in there. Now, that being said, all of my drives at this point in time actually match. Over the last, I believe it's 5 years that I've had this server, maybe 6. Over the last 6 years, I have amassed 12 4TB hard drives. So they are all matching, they are all the same size, but this is basically a 40 terabyte storage array for all of my media, these videos that I store, ISO files. This is my home NAS. This hosts all of anything that's important, and it keeps it redundant. I have 2 parity drives, so I can actually just lose 2 complete hard drives, and all I got to do is pop in some new ones and it'll rebuild that data for me. And this also keeps things like backups for my personal computers and other things. And it is running some virtual machines, but I have been trying to take those off of here. So basically you can boil it down to 2 virtual machine hosts and a NAS. And then this thing right here is just a Triplight power strip. This display shows how many amps it's pulling. You might not be able to read that, but it's currently pulling 5. And I've got this connected to pretty much everything in the rack, but I've also got this nice little port in the front where if I need to plug anything in like a laptop or whatever, I can do that. And also, if you're curious, this keyboard and display combo are connected to the Unraid server, the R510. And last but not least, we've got the very bottom of the rack where I've got my nice little shiplap shelf built, and we can just ignore this 360. It's just sitting in there because I didn't have anywhere else to put it. But the only thing down here really is this CyberPower Ups, and that is just to keep everything powered in the event of a power outage. A lot of the times here there's just kind of power blips. It'll go off for a second or two, and this is enough to keep everything in the rack from powering down every time the power decides to go wonky. And I do use this to kind of see how many watts this rack's pulling. If you're curious, it sits usually around 600 watts for everything in there. So 600 watts, 5 amps for all of this equipment. And that's 3 servers, 2 switches, 2 firewalls, modem, Hue, all of that, and a monitor, which the monitor is shut off most of the time. But that really doesn't make that big of a difference in the power draw anyway. And if you're curious why I got the desktop version and not a rack mount Ups, the rack mounts cost a lot more, and these CyberPowers, the desktop Ups, actually have more battery capacity than the rack mounts for a cheaper price. And then finally, we have the rear of the rack. Besides this one switch, we have all of our power connections back here. But this is what I call my server switch. And it pretty much just houses all of the connections for the servers, as well as monitoring connections and kind of some pass-through. So really what we've got here is 4 connections to the R430. Oh, not R430, R630. Don't know where that came from. And I do have these bundled together in port channels for all of my servers. So we've got 4 physical cables at 1 gigabit going to the R630. We got another 4 going to the R620, and another 4 for our Dell R510, or the storage guy. And then we also have 3 ports, probably these, for what's called our iDRAC. And really what that is just out-of-band server management, so I can log in to the actual hardware of the server. I can power it down, power it on. I can see a virtual console. I don't have to have a monitor attached to these servers to actually manage them. I can do it through the iDRAC. And then the rest of these ports, I've got 2 designated basically for an in and an out for the internet connection. So really between that edge router that we looked at earlier and the modem, there's a cable coming into the switch. Now the purpose of that is so that I can do a span session, and I have a monitor port which actually goes to a VM running Security Onion, so I can monitor all the traffic between the modem and the edge router. And the rest of these, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what they go to, but they go to other things in the rack. Well, I lied. I do know where 4 of them go, and it's another port channel, so I think it's these last 4. That's a port channel between this switch and the other switch in the front. So I do have pretty much 4 gigabits of total traffic that can go between these 2 switches, even though that's not necessary ever. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but this is a 3750E Cisco switch. And this thing is old, but it has done me well for at least the 7 years that I've had it. Actually, I think it's been more than 7 years. I've had it for a while, and it has not failed me yet. So now we've seen my network rack. Let's take a look at the logical layout. So this is the logical diagram of my network. You can see we've got our servers here. We've got the R620, the R630, and Unraid, or the R510. So those are the 3 servers we just looked at. This is that Cisco switch, and this is the front switch for all of the kind of personal devices in my house. And this guy right here is the edge router 4 that we looked at, and here's the SonicWall. But you can see there is a ton of other devices which were not in that rack. You can see that my R630 server is hosting what I call DNS Pi. That is a Pi-hole virtual machine. We've got Downloader, that is a super secret box that I'm not going to talk about. And we have NVR, and that is my home security system. So I have wireless security cameras, and they all record back to this, and it's running Blue Iris. Now the R620 is running Nginx private. If you've seen my videos on an NGINX server, it's a reverse proxy, and this is my private reverse proxy so that I can browse to some of these things by host name, like my Unify server, my UNMS host, my Plexby server. I have a lot of DNS entries pointed to this Nginx server just so I can access things a little more simply. And also on the R620, we got 3 Valheim servers, so that's self-explanatory. I like to play Valheim, so I've got 3 different servers for it. And we also have December DNS Mac. So what this is kind of a secondary DNS server for the guest network. It has a lot more strict rules on it for blocking content. There's certain stuff that I don't really want the guest network going to. I have a lot of filtering set up on this, but it is another Pi-hole, just with more rules for a specific guest network. And I think I can switch to black ink here. This yellow is kind of hurting my brain. And then moving on to the Unraid server, the R510, the storage guy, that is running UNMS, which I have connected to my edge routers, UniFi, which obviously controls my UniFi APs and my UniFi switches, and we've got PlexP. What this is a it's kind of a statistics. How do you explain it? It's like statistics for a Plex server, which nowadays it's kind of not really necessary because Plex had an update not too long ago where it actually keeps statistics on like traffic and users and what movies were watched. But this pretty much just scans the Plex server, sees what user has watched what, when. It just keeps a lot of archives of performance data and just overall general usage. So I do have a Plex server, and that is actually hosted on the Unraid as a Docker. And that is where I keep a lot of my home movies as well as other super secret movies that we're not going to talk about. But you'll see when we get to the Office switch on the left side there, I do have a pretty big VHS library from home movies that were taken for a lot of different family members. So that is stored and shared out to family members through Plex, through a Docker, and I keep track of performance data through PlexP. And then this last VM, December DNS backup.lan, that is another Pi-hole, but I actually just deleted that last night, so that no longer exists. These networks actually used to be split up between 2 different locations, but I just recently merged them all back together, so that's one of the reasons that there is a lot of Pi-holes, because it was really enough for 2 locations before. And one I forgot to mention on the R620, it's just called localhost on this map, but that is a Libre NMS, or Libra NMS, however you say it, network monitoring software, and that's actually what this entire map was made with. This is actually a weather map from Libre NMS plugin called Weather Map. And if you haven't noticed, this actually does keep track of the bandwidth of each link. You can create cool maps like this. You can see what links are using what bandwidth. If you have bandwidth hogs, you can easily see where they're at. Or if you're just having an overall general network issue, you can kind of see it because they go gray when the connection doesn't exist. So you can see kind of what's plugged in, what's unplugged, etc. But let's take a look at all these other devices that are not a part of our main 3 servers. And we got one, look at that, DNS Pi, another Pi-hole. This is actually the main Pi-hole for my network, so we'll do main DNS here. And this second one down here, which is a VM on R630, is the backup. So if one of these goes down, it's going to use the other one, and vice versa. I always like to have 2 DNS servers on the network just in case something happens. If I need to upgrade one or whatever, I always have a backup. Now, one kind of caveat to these Pi-holes, all of my devices point directly to these, but all of my local host names are actually not hosted on the Pi-hole. So even though I have a video showing how to set up local host names on a Pi-hole, I actually don't use that feature. I have these set to forward internal requests to my Windows servers, which is R630 and R620. So anything destined for .lan, as you can see, everything in this map has a .lan suffix. Anything destined for that domain is going to go to one of the Windows servers for name resolution, because that's where I store all of my host names. Now, also moving on, we've got our AP1, and then there's AP2 over here. Those are my 2 UniFi AP-AC Pros. That's for wireless. You can see we have 2.24 megabits of traffic on this one. That is because my security cameras are connected to it, and that is the solid stream going from that access point to the core, over to this other switch, down to R630 into NVR. So you can kind of see how it's a little bit easy to track this traffic with the weather map. But the rest of this here is connected to Office Switch, and we've got Biscuit. That's actually my desktop that I'm using right now. That is my main computer. And we got Toasty Media 1, 2, and 3. So those are named Toasty Media. These are actually a part of my VHS RIP system. So I have capture cards and VHS players connected to 2 of these, and then the other one is basically for conversion using Handbrake, and that communicates directly with the storage server and saves those rips. So I can rip 2 VHS movies at the same time and write them to one of these other computers that converts it and stores it for me. And this is all in my office, and this 81 is actually a virtual machine on Toasty Media 2, I believe. It's either 2 or 3. I do have the Hyper-V feature installed on that one, and I just run, this is Windows Server 2012 Core, I believe, and its only purpose is pretty much DNS. That's a 3rd DNS server. It's probably going away here soon. Its only purpose was because I did not have either R620 or R630 in this house before. They were hosted somewhere else, so I needed my own Windows DNS server here that could replicate with those 2. But that's no longer needed. Now let's address the elephant in the room here, and that is this entire top section. So this is pretty much the internet, and each one of these links is a VPN. So all of those videos you've seen are for me setting up like OpenVPN or WireGuard or whatever. I have those between 2 different sites called Decemberana and December Vienna. And each of these links is actually 3 VPN tunnels. So I am running all at the same time in a regular IPsec VPN, an OpenVPN, and WireGuard. Now, why would I have 3 tunnels between each of these places? Well, if you watched my WireGuard video, I kind of went over the pros and cons of the different VPN protocols, and some of them do certain things better than others. So IPsec is my preferred VPN. That is the one that is always in use when it is running, but if that one goes down because of an IP change or anything, it's going to fail back to either the OpenVPN or the WireGuard VPN. And what that does is it lets me still have a connection to these sites, so I can go in there, fix what's wrong with the primary VPN, and get going. Now, the WireGuard VPN doesn't persist through reboots, so if one of these sites loses power, then my WireGuard configuration is gone. And if that happens, it'll fail back one more level to OpenVPN, which pretty much never goes down. My OpenVPN tunnels are by far the most reliable. I can set those and I can forget them because they use host names. I have dynamic DNS set up with them and all of that. I really don't have to worry about those disappearing on me. But the first 2, they can sometimes go away, and they're the faster ones. So while OpenVPN never goes down, it is by far the slowest VPN connection between these. But that's kind of my reasoning behind having 3. And I balance those by using OSPF and cost. So the cost of the IPsec VPN is less than the cost for WireGuard or OpenVPN. And at these different sites, like in December Vienna, we have a SonicWall and what's called M700.LAN. This is another Windows server running Windows Server 2019. It's just a workstation, and its only purpose is for offsite backups, basically. So all of my critical files that I have stored on Unraid or whatever else, like my family pictures, my Excel spreadsheets for bills, pretty much anything that is very important, I am backing up over these VPNs to this other server, which is in a physically separate location, just in case this entire house goes up in flames. So hopefully I'll have at least my important documents saved if for some reason that happened. And this SonicWall over here is pretty much just a secondary VPN connection to this entire network. So if my main SonicWall goes down and I'm on the road and I need to connect into here, boom, I can just connect to this SonicWall and access my network that way. And that is pretty much the down and dirty of my home network here. There's a lot more I could go into. I could show you each of the servers. There are more services running. Like I do have 3 instances of Veeam for backups running. The community edition of Veeam only allows for 10 device backups, and obviously you can see I have more than 10 devices here. So the main servers that are using Veeam are the R620, R630, and M700, and then those are backing up certain machines either to the external hard drives connected to the M700 or to the actual Unraid array. And also something that might be curious is how many different networks do I have here and the firewalls between them. In my unified videos I've kind of showed you set up different VLANs, etc. I have quite a few. I have one for my personal devices at home, I have one for the servers, I have one for guest, one for Internet of Things, and one for public. And all of these VLANs are split between the two interfaces on my Edge Router 4. So the core pretty much has all the VLANs for servers and public, while this other one has just my home VLAN and like the Internet of Things. And we can kind of color code some stuff. So all of these circled in red are on my public VLAN. They're wide open, but they are not able to connect to anything directly on any other network, because I don't want things that are actually publicly accessible to talk to anything else on my network. These that are green are part of the server infrastructure, which is the majority of everything. This green VLAN is basically the management VLAN. It's by far the biggest one. It's for all the servers and infrastructure devices basically. And then purple is like my personal network, which is on the wireless. Yellow we have guest, which is pretty much just wireless. I don't have any wired guest devices. And then these like NVR and the other DNS server, those are on other VLANs as well, just to be further isolated. So hopefully for those of you who are curious, this kind of gave you a little bit of insight into what we're working with here. Now I do have a second purpose for this video, and that is kind of to see if you guys have any other questions on how any of this is set up. I could probably make a video on some of that if you put it down in the comments below. We'll see where this goes, but this is a very different video, completely pointless. Probably didn't learn anything from this except for, wow, this guy has a lot of crap in his basement. But also, if you're trying to get into the home lab scene or wanting to learn about networking and want to set something up similar, then maybe this gives you a little bit of inspiration or just a little bit of where you can kind of go with this stuff. So as always, happy networking.